it's Hope here, and today I wanted to discuss how a character that got very few lines of dialogue stole my heart and changed the course of my life. Now, for those who have seen my previous video, you probably thought I was a weird kid who got super obsessed with her hyperfixations. And you'd be right. Because when I fixated on something, it became my personality. Watching these shows on repeat, them possessing all of my thoughts, and constantly babbling to anyone who'd listen, mostly my older sister, about them. Sometimes these fixations would take over my life for around a year, and then I'd drop them as if they were nothing. But other times, mostly with cartoons, they would be in my mind for years before moving on to the next. The two big ones for me were My Little Pony and Pokemon. Wow, I guess even then I had very different tastes when it came to the shows I watched. Most of the time, though, my thoughts were directly linked with Pokemon, as it was by far my favorite show. I would always rewatch all the regional series. I wrote down all my favorite episodes on a list, and drew Fakemon all the time. Maybe I should make a video drawing my old Fakemon. But strangely enough, Pokemon wasn't the series that got me into animation. The show inspired my creativity, but not the specific medium of animation. That honor went to the show that would replace Pokemon as my favorite show for quite a while. But it wasn't just the cartoon that pushed me towards animation. It was a specific character from the show. You may not think that's weird at first, but what if I told you that it was a minor character that inspired me to become an animator? Not a secondary character, not even a tritagonist. They were a completely background character on the show. Now you may be wondering, what show did I watch that had this character in it? And to that, I answer, none. Because I wasn't even watching the show at the time. My sister was. It was a little show, you probably haven't heard of it, called Steven Universe. I remember being intrigued by the show, but I didn't watch it. Because when I was beginning to watch the series with my sister, I began an episode without her and she got upset. So instead of being like, next time I should just wait for her, I was like, I shall never watch Steven Universe again! Very clearly a lie, but I was also lying to myself. So I guess the best kind of lie. Also, I remember not wanting to watch the show because it had romance in it, and I was like, ew, flirting/relationships, blah. Adults should only be yelling at each other. Why are they enjoying each other's company? Blah. Yep, typical childish behavior of overreacting and being repulsed by romance of any kind. Despite these factors, though, every time my sister watched the show, I would always glance at the screen. Steven Universe always had a hold on me, despite wanting to deny it. A little random, but I remember glancing one time and seeing Jasper on screen, and I immediately thought she was a boy. Because no girl can be muscular and have a deep voice. Those are only man qualities. Dear God, I was a dumb kid. Anyways, this continued on until one day when my family was on vacation, me and my sister were left alone in the room. No big deal. She was gonna watch the latest episode of Steven Universe, and I, someone who was definitely not even gonna look at the screen, would watch Pokemon and draw. But nonetheless, despite not meaning to, I was very intently listening to the episode. This particular episode was the first episode of Season 5, a very intense episode in general, because the episode is literally about a 14-year-old boy being kidnapped and then being accused of being a war criminal due to his mommy issues. There's a little bit more to that, but you gotta watch the show on your own to figure that out. I remember being very confused about what was going on because it was Season 5 and I had no context for what was going on. I tried to stay focused on my Pokemon, but then Lars, one of the kidnapped characters, had a breakdown on screen, and I remember how impactful that was to me as a kid. I was so shocked to see Lars and Steven have such an emotionally raw conversation, as other shows I watched would never have characters react so realistically to such a horrifying situation. At the time, I didn't realize why this conversation grabbed my attention the way it did. All I knew is that I thought it was super cool. But then...
That's so beautiful.
Topaz, the two's bodyguard, starts to bawl, explaining how the two topazes that made her... Okay, quick explanation. In Steven Universe, two or more gems can fuse together to make a completely new gem out of love or necessity. Fusing with gems outside your own is forbidden along with love. We good? Good. We're in love with each other, but they had to hide it due to the tyrannical homeworld not accepting them. Even though I had no idea what fusion was, or homeworld, or what tyrannical governments were, despite living in one, what I did know is that Topaz's reaction had me hooked, and I immediately fell in love with this sweet pea, and kept watching the episode to see more of her. When the episode ended, I was devastated to see her go back to being subservient to homeworld. But as a kid, I was fully convinced she'd come back in the special and get her happily ever after, because that's what always happens, right? So I began to watch the rest of the special with my sister. Along the way, though, I got really invested into the plot that was unraveling. Even if I didn't know what was happening and had to ask my sister a million questions like, what's shattering? And who's this rose quartz lady? She seems important. I also just saw Blue Diamond mourning Pink Diamond and became a little too sympathetic towards her because at the time, I didn't realize that Blue Diamond was one fusion-hating bigot. By the time the special was over, Steven Universe became my new main hyperfixation. Sorry, Pokemon. The story was phenomenal, the world was incredible, and the characters had such interesting storylines. Me and my sister then began to watch some of the previous lore episodes of Steven Universe, so that way I could understand the plot better when the show began again. Surprisingly enough though, Topaz was still my favorite character. It's odd because the reason I loved her so much was because she was so kind-hearted, but Steven was right there, so I don't know why he didn't make #1. I remember talking about her all the time, thinking of all the adventures she would definitely go on in the show. Creating fan art of her, and alas, looking up fan fiction of her, I'm cringing! I actually had an easier time with her than I did with Mewtwo and Red Genesect, but it was still very difficult, especially since there were so many people who had their own Topaz Gemsonas. So I had a difficult time finding a fic with the canon Topaz, because there were just so many gosh darn OCs. I constantly babbled to my sister about all these stories and was always asking her, Sis, when do you think Topaz will appear again? I wonder when Topaz is going to be seen in the show. Sis, Topaz! My sister tried to ease me into the idea that this character was probably not going to be seen again. And I must admit, with every old episode I watched, I was losing a little more hope. But I was still very optimistic. So much so that when I heard Rebecca Sugar sing Escapism, I immediately thought, without hesitation, this is gonna be a Topaz song. It was such a leap at the time because everyone and their mother wanted/expected it to be a Lapis song, because she had no songs previously. But I crossed my fingers, hoping, nay, praying it would be a Topaz one. In fact, I was so inspired that I decided I was gonna make my first animatic about Topaz singing Escapism. And yes, the video is still up to this day. Please don't watch it because it's really bad. In fact, don't watch any of the first 3 animatics I made. They're really bad and not how I want to be represented as an artist today. It's the internet. There's no point in telling you guys to stop. Also, side note, I was thoroughly disappointed by the fact that not only did Topaz not sing Escapism, but no characters did. It was a background song this whole time. And while Rebecca Sugar does sing like a goddess, it's still upsetting after all that hype. Having fans theorize about who could have sung this song, when it turned out to be no one. Anyways, I continued to believe that Topaz would come back to the series, until about the middle of season 5, where I feared I'd never see my girl again. Despite this, Steven Universe was still my new favorite show, even though I thought they were doing my girl dirty. And kept watching the show. Even though she wasn't making any appearances in the canon, I still created stories about Topaz and all the other characters I liked, whether they be in the world of Steven Universe or not, going on wacky, zany adventures. It was during this time that I began to create more fan art of not just Steven Universe, but a bunch of different shows I watched, My Little Pony, Pokemon, and many more. Then my sister, who laid witness to all my madness, suggested that I should become an animator, so that way I could start creating my own stories.
Job secure.
Athena, out of my room now!
Okay.
Anyways, at first I was a little hesitant, because I didn't have any ideas for original concepts. But as time went on, I started to create a bunch of stories. And these stories got more and more unique every time I wrote for them. And soon enough, they became their own original ideas instead of just fan content. Eventually, I would get inspiration to create my own Pokemon fan series. Surprisingly enough, by watching a Steven Universe fan series. And my main art style is very much based on the Steven Universe art style, if you couldn't tell. And that's how this minor character, this Joe Schmo, that for some reason only got 1 episode to speak, even though that little blue bitch Aquamarine had a whole episode with that one-eyed little twerp, got me to become the wannabe show creator I am today. Looking back on a more personal note, maybe I liked her so much because she didn't have much screen time, because maybe then she couldn't disappoint me like the other characters did. Maybe I just projected myself and how I felt about the world into this character, so I could have this power fantasy that I would never have in real life. Or maybe I just thought she was really sweet. Probably a bit of both. In the end, I'm very happy I obsessed over Topaz, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't have seen the masterpiece that is Steven Universe, and it would have taken me longer to get into animation. I still think I would have gone into it eventually, because I was a very cartoon-obsessed child. But nonetheless, it was my obsession with this cartoon character that helped me along my artistic journey, and I wouldn't be where I am today without her. And hey, I guess I wasn't the only one who adored her, because as previously mentioned, she did have 2 cameos in Future. So I guess she got her happily ever after all. Even if I didn't see it take place in the series. And now I present to you the finished speed paint of Teenage Hope drawing her fave gem. I'm really happy with how this drawing turned out, especially with the character taking inspo from my previously animated avatar. Well, that just so happens to be the end of my video. I hope you liked it. I'm going to try to post a bunch of animatics along with commentary that you can see in between, so stick around if you want to see more. See you later, Gators and Animators. Bye!